you for being patient during this little technical delay. As a project manager, I should have remembered that when you have a video to share, which we're going to have a short video in a few minutes, make sure that it will play on whatever computer you're going to use. And there's one risk I did not take into consideration this morning. How many people have ever heard of DiSC? How many have ever taken the assessment? Anybody? A couple people. That's good. What we're going to do this morning, we're going to use a workshop format to really understand how our communication styles might influence our ability to work together with others that we work with in the workplace. And we're going to really talk together about how it might play out in your job transition, your job searches, your interviews, those kinds of activities. It's not going to be the half-day, full-day version that I might do for an organization, but you're going to get a chance to sort of, think about how you communicate and how others communicate with you and how we can all improve that. How many people have worked in an organization where, there's just that one person who just doesn't get me? They just, every time I try to explain my point, they talk over me, they don't listen, they're on to whatever their points are, and I just can't get through. So, how many? Have we all had that scenario? Sometimes we have it in our families. Sometimes we have it with our closest, or not as close, our closest friends. That's what DiSC is it's a personality, behavioral sort of tool to help us understand other people's behaviors, our own behavior, when we first start with our own, so that we can understand how we react to other people and how we might educate other people on how to best communicate with us. That's what we're really going to talk about today. So, when as many people are in a job transition, looking for that next career move, and one of the things some of the things that I'm sure that 40 Plus has educated you on, or you may be thinking about it, are, well, what are people looking for when hiring new employees? And these are some of the top things that in a variety of studies I've seen that people are really looking for. They're looking for, a person's ability to work with other people on a team, to make decisions, to communicate verbally with both the people that you're working with, but as well as their clients, your clients, other external stakeholders. In addition to doing, planning, organizing work, understanding the information, and communicating it to others, all of those things are pretty soft skills, aren't they? They're not necessarily the, John said he was an accountant by trade. They're not the accounting skills. They're not the technical skills for whatever job you're going to go get. They're the fit, the interpersonal stuff. I used to say when I was in IT, I was a long-time manager, project manager, program manager within IT, and when I would hire people, I can train people on the skills. I can't train you how to be a person that I'd want to work with, what I'd want to sit across the table from, or have to talk to. You can't communicate. It's hard to train those kinds of things. So these are really important for many organizations. So we talked about, are there people that you get along with, don't get along with? And I'm sure that we could all sit here, and if we were doing a larger workshop, we would totally do this as an exercise. We would sit down and we would look at, think of that person. Who's the person that think about the person. Just think about somebody who you really struggle to communicate with. I know I have the one that comes to mind always for me, because we would be oil and water. We both wanted the same things, but we so went about it in such a different way that we could, I was like, I can explain the same thing that my friend Becky can explain. She can take what I said, and this person, let's call him John, not this John, we'll just call him another John. He just wouldn't listen. But Becky can say almost the same thing I did, but in a different way, and he totally gets it. These are just the way we communicate. As I learned about DiSC, I learned about how his style is versus my style and how to interact a little bit differently. And it really made a difference in how we were able to get along and communicate. So what I want to do, this is going to be a really interactive workshop. We're going to really talk about, with each other, about things that you're drawn to, ways of communicating that you really feel resonate with you. We're going to talk, so we talked a little bit about DiSC. We're going to see a video in a little while. We're going to talk a little bit more about what is the DiSC assessment and what is that DiSC tool. But that's not that important for you to know. You don't need to remember all of those kinds of things. What you're going to remember is what you're going to learn and hear from each other about your own way of communication, what you're comfortable with, as well as how to sort of recognize another style and learn ways that you can deal with that other style. Anybody heard of the golden rule? Who can say what the golden rule is? Anybody?
Do unto others as you have done to you.
Right, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Is that right? Do unto others, yeah. That you treat others the way you would like to be treated. How many people have heard of the platinum rule? Anyone?
Cost more.
Costs more? In DiSC terminology, the platinum rule is do unto others the way they would like to be, communicate to others the way they would like to be communicated with. So think about that in terms of people that you struggle with. Have you ever gotten to a point where you go into you want a decision from somebody? Maybe it's your boss, maybe it's a coworker, and you go and you're the type of person who, if you want me to make a decision, I need the background. You need to give me the story. You need to give me the data, give me the details so that I can understand how you got here, and then I can help you make a decision. And then you have other people who say, give me the facts. Just give me. I don't want all that backstory. Just give me the bottom line, and I'll tell you which way we're going to go. Has anybody experienced that? Those are two different styles. DiSC is about helping you understand what your style is and helping you recognize styles in others so that when you go to talk to the person who's a different style than you kind of understand how to tailor your own communication so that they can hear it. So it sinks into them in the way they process information best. Okay? So take a look at these terms. On the top we have fast-paced and outspoken. The other words are active, assertive, dynamic, and bold. And on the other side we have cautious and reflective. In terms that fit into that category are moderate pace, calm, methodical, and thoughtful. Now, I see a lot of people taking notes. I will send out the slides. In fact, I'm going to send around an attendance sheet so that if you want the slides or you want to sign up on a mailing list that I have about where I might be doing some other workshops on project management, on DiSC, on communication, you can sign up here, and I'll use this to send you the information. If you have any questions, you can, note any questions or comments or, on the far right side or left side, right side. Yeah, so if you can just send that around. So you can, I'll be sending these, I'll send this to you, a link to everybody who wants one. So what I'd like you to do is let's take the people who feel like, figure out which of these sets of words feel more like you. Which ones do you resonate with the most? And if you resonate more with the fast-paced and outspoken, sort of words, come up here to the front. And if you resonate more with the other set, huddle back there in the back.
What if you're somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I would say.
And for this category, we're going to get to that. But find the one that feels like it fits you both the most. You have to make a choice. Now,
What were the?
front is the fast-paced,
Okay.
back is the conscious and reflective. And what I'd like you to do is get with your group and then talk about what is it about you that made you feel like those are the right fit for you. Now, if you start having this discussion and you're like, you know what, this really doesn't feel like me, let me go check out this other group. Use the law of 2 feet. Go to the one that, try the other group. So just, you got a great big group, you can split yourselves into a couple here to have a short conversation. You're going to take 3 or 4 minutes. Just talk. Notice who's there.
More cautious, reflective.
What is it about it that made you choose this topic? That set? And what I like so what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to share some of the things that came out of your discussions. Let's just start here. What kinds of things came out of your discussions? You guys are the fast-paced and outspoken group.
Some of the things that we do for a living really pull upon those skills. They're natural skills that we have and we bring to the table. In terms of being outgoing, it's a natural tap into. So some of us are diverse too, and when to do it and when to pull back. But I would say that was one of the things that was maybe a common thing.
Okay. What else?
Speed that people speak at.
Speed that they speak.
Trying to slow ourselves down sometimes to be able to communicate with others.
Slowing yourself down is sometimes something you need to do. Absolutely makes sense.
We thought that it was often a situational thing. We might be more of one or more of the other, depending on the group. What were the other factors? How are you feeling?
Yeah. And having the ability to, we were sharing, many of us, that we feel like we belong to both groups. And we were saying that it was important to identify when it's useful to you to be one or the other and adjust to those around you.
Right, adjusting and how to be more one way one day or another way the other day.
As a function of the people that you are with and not necessarily how you're feeling, which is how I feel.
Right. How about this group in the back? Cautious and reflective group. Talk about what some of the things were that you...
I was on the side, and we felt like like we were part of it at times, as we were struggling with. I think we're from workplaces that demand something, and so if we had our druthers, we would be more so.
More cautious and more quiet.
Yeah, and
so
I think
like
that's
your
why
jobs demand more.
At least for me, I think that's why I chose this group is for that. But then we were also talking about how workplace culture kind of dictates that. Like if we've been in workplace cultures that are more of like the cautious, reflective types, and we've sort of trained ourselves into that bucket.
Anything else?
I was just going to say the one thing that we discussed is you may start in sort of a calm, methodical, thoughtful approach, but as you get to know someone more, you may evolve, in our case, to the more assertive, outward type of environment. Again, reading the person and sort of knowing the type of person they are. And that could be vice versa, right? If you're, you could move down, I guess, in a sense, too. So I don't know.
Well, I was going to say, I know this is in the context of relationships, but maybe aside from relationships and switching to just a situation, the moderate pace and methodical and calm kind of reflects a desire to get a lot of information and research first. But then, if that, you were saying, if you feel the situation is important and you have that information, you can be very bold and dynamic. And I would agree that it depends on the situation then whether you're you're
And nobody
going to
is-
be bold if necessary.
Exactly. And no one is always one versus the other. But notice what you all said. You have things in common. There are things in common with both people who feel more comfortable on the cautious and reflective side as well as the fast-paced and outspoken. So thinking about those aspects, let me ask you a different kind of question, different aspect. Oops, the wrong button. What if, take a look at these words. If you feel more questioning and skeptical, logic-focused, objective, reserved, challenging, if those feel more like you, I'd like you to move to this side of the room. But if you feel more, as a more accepting, warm, people-focused, empathizing, receptive, agreeable, those kinds of terms resonate more, I'd like you to move more over to this side of the room. As well. And let's hear, who would like to go first and tell us a little bit about your side? One thing I noticed is there's a large group over here in the accepting and warm side. And there was a larger group in the fast-paced and outspoken side. Now, when I do this with an intact team, it's easier to see because they know one another. It's interesting to see how this plays out relative to their job duties and the kind of organization that I'm with. With a team that doesn't really know one another, and I did this with a business agility, and a lot of those folks were in sort of software development, and you could see where people stood. It was just a fascinating sort of thing. It'd be if we had time, we'd go around the room and say, what fields are you all in, and then think about how the kinds of things that resonate with you, how they are mapping to what the kinds of jobs you're in or looking for. So who wants to go and talk about what you observed and discussed in your groups on these two topics? Who wants to go first? John?
We felt like if you were opposite, if you were, for example, cautious and then you're skeptical, then you're probably going to be like oil and water with people who were aggressive and warm. There's a higher probability that you're going to have conflicts then. And if you were the same on both of them, then you're probably going to connect a little more, or the tendency would be to connect. And then there's you could be, one same, one different, and you're going to be somewhere in between.
Interesting observation. Yeah.
Why would you be aggressive?
Well, I said don't necessarily make that.
I was just listening to the choice of words. To me, I saw you all as very much methodic in terms of when you talk about logic focus, you have a process in terms of how you have to look at stuff. So you being an accountant would make sense. I would never be able to do that because process is just not in my DNA, So absolutely.
The word that I said in the group, and one other word that comes by, I said these people are more focused on self-preservation.
Focus on self-preservation. That's
It seems like
Which people are you talking
safer ways. So notice that, first of all, there's no right and no wrong. But notice how it's all about perception, right? So what part of our takeaway today is about understanding how I perceive Ron might be very different than how he feels like he is. And I'm going to perceive a person in a certain way, and based on my comfort, my styles, my preferences, my priorities, I might treat him a certain way or communicate with him in a way that I think will resonate. And he may say, well, that totally misperceived me, misunderstood me, and here's how it would be more effective if you communicated to me in this other way. Who else has something to share?
I think another thing that we're talking about is that maybe that group, for example, will have a lot of accountants.
Can you speak up a little? I don't know if you heard.
Sorry, I lost my voice this
Oh,
weekend
no.
because my kids, they were fighting me at school.
And you're gonna go home and you're gonna think about this relative to
my
them.
16-year-old, I'd love to make this work. But basically that group, sometimes they might be, let's say, techies, or they might be really into numbers. And from our group, we may have that background, but because we're more people-oriented, they think, oh, we don't understand what they're talking about as far as the numbers or the technical background, whatever. So that's where we kind of clash. It doesn't mean that we don't understand them, but they think, oh, you really don't know anything about this. So that creates conflict. And because they're not so expressive, we're probably heading the same direction, but we're not communicating.
I thought it was a lot of negative perception of this.
No, we like you.
You're warm and accepting.
Interesting.
Just can't trust it.
Lana?
Well, not to say anything negative, because I think people can have characteristics from both sides, but I think it depends on the person and the situation. But I think for this side, something positive is we basically try to look at the present and see how people are feeling in the moment and try to connect on them one-on-one and empathize with them and see like how can we make them feel better, or how can we're more like, like she was saying, people person, so like we're outspoken, so we'll come out and we generally care about other people's feelings and make sure that, their feelings are being met. And sometimes we might even go to the extent that we care more about others than ourselves. We might put others first, for example, in this group. And it also just depends on the individual and the circumstance, but I just wanted to add that. Whereas, other people might just have a little different way of relating to us and our approach.
I can add one more thing to this. Problem that happens sometimes in this group, and I find it frustrating because this group might become too feely that sometimes things don't get done, and you want to shift in there and you want to say like, just stop with the feelings already and just get the work done. So sometimes even within this group, like we notice that, but there'll be like one person in the group that's going to keep harping on the whole feelings thing. Nothing gets done.
Rob, and then we'll move on.
Looking at a list of the terms on the accepting and warm side, okay, so the third one maybe is going to be a little bit of a, if you are receptive, I think that is something that you are, I know you're receiving something, information, emotion from the other person, but in a way you're giving your attention to that. So what I was my point was the other three sort of also, so this is the accepting and warm column, but those 1, 2, and 4 also are looking for that feedback from the other person, and if you don't get that,
if they're not getting it,
right, and it may not be that they aren't feeling that, but if the other person or the other group isn't responding to you, then if you're in this group, you're going to maybe feel a little uncomfortable if you're encapsulating those other words there, terms. You need that feedback.
Interesting. That's a good point. So let's go ahead and get back in our seats. I want to get you up again in a few minutes. DiSC is not about one, there are four components of DiSC, D-I-S-C. D is dominant, I is influential, S is steady, and C is conscientious.
You're probably going to get to this, but the only reason I'm actually here is to find out why the I is lowercase.
Yeah, you know what, then it comes up in every one. It's a branding thing. From Wiley, the company who owns everything DiSC. So, if you're the, I bet you, were you down here somewhere? No?
I don't know what I am now.
Oh, okay. We'll talk about that in half a second. But their DiSC, if you're a person who's questioning, skeptical, and you're really into data, you're going to want to understand better what this all is and so forth, and that's what this slide is about. That it's based on research that spans like 90 years. There was a professor at Columbia named Dr. William Marston back in the 20s, and he observed that different people behave in different ways, and pretty much had an idea that it's 4 basic different ways. But since then, lots of people have built on it. The idea, unlike Myers-Briggs and some of the other ones, DiSC was never like trademarked in a specific way. So you have different companies who have built their own DiSC models and built their own, not necessarily the model itself, but different ways of teaching it. So, but it's still, the concepts and the ideas of DiSC are pretty similar across any company that says we do DiSC. Wiley, DiSC, the version that I've been, focused on is called Everything DiSC, and I focus on Everything DiSC Workplace. There's Everything DiSC for sales. There's Everything DiSC for conflict and performance and a variety of different things. And I focus on more of the workplace communications. And Wiley branded, they wanted to stand out differently than some of the other ones, and so they put the little I in lowercase. It's all a marketing thing from Wiley. But DiSC still gives you the common language to be able to talk about the four different influence or 4 different styles of communication. So I want to we're going to play this video. I'm going to make sure my sound is on. I hope everyone can hear it. Can you hear it? Oh.
Yes.
Would it change the way you work together? Would it make your job easier? Yeah, it probably would. But that's not the real world. Or is it? Maybe if you had the right decoder, everyone's needs would be a lot more obvious.
recognize any of those folks? Have you worked with some of them before? So you see, DiSC is not a, it has to do with the 4 quadrants, but in combination with one another. So if you chose the fast-paced and outspoken and you were on the question on skeptical, you're most likely a dominant style, the way DiSC would see it. Now, if we were doing a workshop, the dot that they talked about is if you took the assessment, that's a video we would use in a full DiSC workshop, you would have taken the assessment and it would give you a 20-page report, and it would put a dot where you specifically tested along this whole continuum of DiSC. And so you would know how strong your preferences are for any of the different styles and which things you're more weak in. So remember in the video, it showed the last example was mostly on that side and a little bit on this side of the quadrants. It would give you more sense of where you're strong or not strong in. Some people are right in the middle, some people are on the outside edges and are very, very much one way versus another way as far as what their priorities are, what they're more comfortable in, and kind of how they behave. Here, if you're fast-paced and outspoken and accepting and warm, if you were in that quadrant, you're most likely an influencing style. And then similarly with the other two. And notice that you have the 4 quadrants, but depending on where you are, got the little red thing here, depending on where you are, you might be somebody who is just right here, really focused on a dominant sort of style, or you may be very dominant, but also share characteristics with the seed. Now, someone earlier pointed out over here in this group that one of the things you noticed is the people who are up here might have more challenges with the people who are in their opposite quadrants. And that's proven out, I think, also with some of the research, as well as we probably all felt that. If you feel like that you were a certain, more of a certain way, and you think about other people and how you might recognize them, at least for me, I find that the people, so on my dot is right there. I've taken this, 8 or 9 times. Sometimes I'm a little S and a lot of S and a little C, and sometimes I'm CS. But pretty much my dot sits literally on this line and that line. So I'm really strongly here. The people that I struggle with are up there. Doesn't mean we can't get along. I have to think about ways to talk to them now.
Can you be sort of in between 3?
Yes.
I can see myself in between 2.
Yeah. I have one of my closest friends is kind of right in here. So she's not really strong in any of the things, but she is right here. And once I learned DiSC, I put all my different friends of mine. I'm like, okay, I wonder what they are. and in some cases, we've been in classes and taken the DiSC, and I'm like, oh, yep, I was right. Ooh, this one I was not quite right. And so she doesn't do a lot of data. She's a really touchy-feely person and really wants to make a decision. She's an Aries, and she's always said, that we jump first and plan later. And so it's interesting how you and your different friends and colleagues and kids might fit in different sort of situations. So what we want to do now is and so it talks about the dots as well. So somebody who is here is less strong as an I and will probably have more of all of these. the further you get out to the edge, the stronger that inclination is for you. And you would see that if you took the assessment. There are free assessments. The one, if you take Wiley's, which is why we didn't do it here, is an extra $65. That would be my cost to get an assessment. But you get a 20-page workbook or a profile, and that's what we would cover in our full workshop. But it's amazing how it's like, oh my God, they've been listening to me in my car. You know, they've been listening to me in my home. How did they know all of those things? Because it's amazing how accurate it was relative to how I feel. But let's talk about the styles. We've talked about a little bit about the characteristics of styles. And you've seen some people moved with you and some people moved to the opposite side when you changed. Let's get into a situation. We're going to get into 4 quadrants again, based on these quadrants and these areas. So let's have the people who feel like they're most likely the dominant style. Let's have you come up here in this corner. And what we're going to do, we're going to break you up into 4 groups, and then I'm going to give you this piece of paper, and you can, sit around the tables so you can write what you'd like. I only brought 4, thinking we could do this in 4 different groups, and maybe
we have a photocopier. I can make copies if you want more.
Yeah, we might want to do that. So what I want to do, just make because just given how many people we had in each group, make 2 copies. Just take this and make 2 copies so we can have 2 groups of each one if we need them.
Okay, so you want me just to make 1 copy of the group? You want another copy? Or
Yeah, just go make 1 copy of this group. That'll be enough. Because what we're going to do is I'm going to have you break into 4, and I want you to talk about, with DiSC, depending on the style, you may have there are things that you might contribute more in your workplace, more to your work. What are your greatest, I want you to think about what are your greatest contributions from your style? What is it that people with your style you feel like are the greatest contributions you bring to a work environment? So we want to talk about that. Contributions. So I think I have a slide. Ready? Contributions to your workplace, your fears, things that you're, somebody who is C style, what's one of their fears? What are they afraid will happen?
We don't want to answer before we go in, we'll fail.
There you go. Fear of failure. What if you were a dominant style? What might your fears be?
It won't get done.
It won't get done. If you were an S style, what might a fear be?
We don't fear anything.
Rushing into something.
Rushing into something.
Not having the resources to get stuff done.
Maybe.
Change.
Pardon me?
Change.
Change. Fear of change. Fear that people aren't getting along. You want people to get along. And if you were an I style, what might you be afraid of in a workplace environment? Back there?
No one's listening.
No one's listening.
Letting people down. Like if it doesn't get done. Disappointing them.
That could be, yeah. So let's get in 4 quadrants. Let's have, thank you. Let's have the D's up here. And I'd like you to have a discussion, and we can have 2 groups of D's, 2 or 3, depending on how many we have. We'll decide how many we're going to do, depending on how many people can stand in each quadrant. So you get up here and you can sit at tables so that you can have a discussion. Let's get everybody who feels like D might be the best representation of their style up here in this corner. The I's can be over there. The C's can be back back in that corner and the S's over here. So just go to where, and you have to pick one. But if you start in this discussion and you feel like, this maybe not, this is not a scientific thing, we didn't do the assessment.
Well, we have great contributions.
This is like a SWOT thing, and all your strengths are like this big, and your threats are like this big.
It might be. So let's hear from one group at a time. And it doesn't matter who goes first. Who would like to I'd like to hear a little bit about each of these 4 topics. These want to go first?
Sure. Do we share all of it?
Yes. So what I'd like you to do is, as you're listening to each group, you might want to make some notes, particularly if there's somebody in your sphere of people where you think they might be one of the quadrants that you're not. Make some notes about what you learned from these folks. Now, one of the things I will do, I'll frequently do this with a flip chart, and then so everybody can see it. We didn't do flip charts today. I did these individual papers, but I will take a photo of each one of the papers, and I'm happy to share them so that you can all have them when, if you've gotten your name on the attendance list, then I'll share that as well as the slide so that you can have that as a guideline to take back.
A decoder ring.
A decoder ring, absolutely. Many of us remember decoder rings.
This is 40 plus.
Here we go.
You're right. I forgot who I'm talking about. I did. There's another one using Jerry Seinfeld, an exercise about trying to understand the styles. But a lot of the folks that I talked with in a different group were much younger, and so I took that out, thinking, but I could have brought that today in a 40-plus group. Okay.
So we thought that we have wonderful contributions. We offer vision, we get results quickly, we are driven, we offer leadership and make decisions. Isn't that wonderful? Now, we are a little fearful too. Our fears, probably motivation, is that things won't get done. We might be discovered as fraud because we might not be having a strategy in place at all times. We are afraid of being imposing and suppressive of other people, suppressing other people, not actively listening others, and having things done in a way that is not well thought out. So we might be rushing a little. It's just nicer to speak about the contributions. How were we misunderstood? As mean, aggressive, demanding, and pushy? We're not any of those. And lacking in strategy because we are just focused on results. And finally, how others can relate to us. What would we like to see others relate? How we would like others to be related to us is to get to the point, offer us substance, good information, and don't take it personal. I summarize it like that.
Thank you. Give him a hand. Does anyone have any, was there anything that they said that surprises you about someone who feels more like the D style, dominant style?
Yeah, I was surprised when they admit about the fraud thing. Because
Any other surprises?
Difficult to do.
John?
Yeah, I was impressed that you said you have this the way you feel like you're perceived, but you're like, but it's not like that at all. It's not like that at all.
And that's true for any of these. We all feel misunderstood sometimes, in ways that we don't feel ourselves. How about questions?
Yeah, I was just saying one thing that I thought was interesting too is in the don't take it personal. Depending on kind of where you fall in that can be very challenging to try and internalize. And I think at times if you're a D, Ds may say things in a form or fashion or an environment that is just their personality. And literally, they can move on to something like that, and they're not even thinking about it, whereas the person they've addressed, depending on where you are, is sitting there for 10 minutes going, oh my gosh, I just got yelled at.
Yeah.
You know, and they're off ordering lunch, you know, and you're still internalizing.
Does that feel?
Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
And here I have to say, as we speak about this, we were really tapping into the D, but of course, I mean, it's not like we lack.
Right.
Yeah, I think.
Kind of epiphany about D's, that their decisiveness is overcompensation for self-doubt.
That's why we're saying the fraud. Exactly.
Right.
We're just thinking and
Yeah.
get it done and.
Right.
Yeah, and fear that things won't get done, so
Yeah.
just.
Yeah.
We don't want to have those endless meetings.
Yeah.
And just don't come out with anything.
Any questions for the Ds? If you have anybody who you think is a D and you really want some ideas or feedback on how to address a situation with a D. Any questions for the Ds? Okay.
Well,
Let's-
I have one.
Yes.
Okay, I'm curious, does that mean that you prefer working with these as well?
Not necessarily.
No.
Or what?
Because we see the value and strengths of others because we don't possess that listening skill. So I married someone who definitely is the opposite of me. So I need to get the details in him. So just, I think because we're over the age of 40, that we know we can value others, and that's the value of the teamwork. However, there are times when we're, just like other people are hitting their heads against the wall. We were talking about, if I have one more meeting about a meeting to have a meeting, because it's the process, people that want it, I'm like, just tell me what you want me to do and I'll get it done, you know, and I want to come back to that meeting and give the results. And one true example was my manager was giving me my review and she went on all about this wonderful contribution I had that year. Did I get a raise? Do I swap jobs? Do I just switch it up? And so she laughed after I did one of these tries. And so the next year she goes, okay, so you know, and she gave it backwards, and then she went back into that stuff. So I value that this person took such detail, and I hope I'm answering your question, I'm sorry, just making it personalized. But I do appreciate that there's a skill set that I don't have, you know, so the value of the team is tapping in and seeing the value that we, as a collaboration, can work together.
So Sid, you made a very important point I wanted to come back to, which is, think about as we go through some of these, and if we have time, we're going to do another exercise in a few minutes about how it plays out in the workplace, how it plays out in your job transition and the first few days on the job. But one of the things you said was about performance reviews and maybe feedback by supervisors, being able to, and how it changed once you and or your supervisor understood different styles and different ways to communicate and what's important and what's not. I think that's a critical takeaway for those of you who are managing, those of you who are working in leadership kinds of positions, and in a 40-plus group. Some of you are currently doing that, looking to do that, have done that, and will do it again. So these are some of the kinds of things that can be really important and helpful in a workplace. All right, who's next? Which group's next?
We're the C's.
We're the C's.
So our contributions, we Google everything first.
Google everything first? Is that what you said?
Yeah, like if there's any question, we go first to like look it up, right? We're open to changes, we're more willing to listen to things, and we're more process aware. And I feel like those are our contributions. Our fears are being left out, marginalized, things moving too fast, and building things that aren't sustainable. And then how we're misunderstood. For paralysis by analysis, we come off as less enthusiastic. And we also, as much as we believe that we're more open to changes, we come off as less open to changes because we have the tendency to like raise our hand first and ask like the how or who's doing it. How others can relate to us is to give us a little more time to process and to help us refine processes.
All right, give him a hand. Who has any questions for the C's? Any questions for our group of C's?
How can we be?
Yes.
I don't see C's as open to change.
Can you explain a little bit how you're open?
No, she said less open.
No, it's both, right?
Oh.
Because I think what happens is, and I think this is very specific to like group things, you know, so someone comes out in the room, say D, says, we're doing this, right? And everyone like jumps on board, and then there's like one person in the room that's like, hey, and the hey isn't a no, and I think that that's the assumption. Is that the assumption is that that person is saying no because so many people automatically jumped on board, and I think as a C, like the thing that I'm asking is the how and the what, and I want to know that, or I want to be able to Google it first before I come to you and say yes, I'm on board. And I think that's it's definitely a challenge in like group settings.
We want to make sure that what we're going forward with is going to work.
Yeah.
I had a question about which letter or type of person do you feel that you're most terrified of working with?
It's some combination between the D and the I. You know, like the people that move, like the cult leader. Not that.
That's what we're labeling.
You know, like the charismatic, like the charismatic personality that seems to like sweep like the entire organization, and I haven't had a chance to like know them or like know like the details of what their pitch is.
Interesting.
I also feel very identified with the C.
Yeah.
And I think there's the challenge, I think, is to distinguish that line between, yes, we're making sure that the details
Yeah.
are there to support the decision,
Yeah.
and when are we getting a little lost in too many details? Like having
Yeah.
that, and I guess different people call that different levels of for where is that line?
Yeah, and I would say I'm distinctly in the middle of that CD paradigm because some of it is the role. Like I work in a lot of systems work for organizations, and so it gets bogged down in details for people that are like heavily into C or like data people. But like I also have to get to someplace up here for me to find it satisfying, and so I definitely have like that compulsion back and forth depending on.
So then my question, following up on that, is the what the others need to do to relate is to give time, but then the question is going to be, how much time do you need? Is it, and also, is it time or is it facts or is it both? And like, so how do we help you get to the point where you can move on? Not you personally.
No. It's like if someone raises their hand, it's to give a pitch, and then to give them actual measures of success. So how is this going to be sustainable? How is this going to work out for the team as a whole? And then, you know, for most of us, like the good to great, like that trade-off is always a thing. For conscientious, I feel like it's that want to perfection, and so it does need a nudge, I feel like, at times.
Well, I think also too, it's a matter of time and space.
Yeah.
Like, don't look down on it just because we want to say, hey, well, let's look at this, because we haven't looked at this before, this could be a problem, let's look at it. So there's the space to ask the question instead of just knocking it down.
Be intentional about it.
Yeah.
Is there, you couldn't see my face. Is there a way that we could give you the data or the something first so you could process it before the meeting maybe?
For sure.
So
Like,
that
you
is
can
overcome? I don't know, I'm just trying to think of ways that we could do
Yeah,
that.
like if you're presenting an idea and you knew, like, you have the deck ahead of the meeting, it's worth it to shoot it out, because I think for the C folks, it definitely helps with the process, right? Like, we've seen the information before, and so then we're not asking the details of it.
And your questions might be tighter.
Yeah.
But being prepared, we're going to expect some, good answers.
Yeah.
And if you're kind of flighty about it, we're like, I don't know about this. And that's going to prolong discussions. So you have to prove it to us.
Yeah.
I was going to say, at that point,
One more comment, and then we need to move on to the next group.
I was going to say, do you think you're correcting our work then? Because
No, we're not trying to correct your work.
Right.
We're trying to get a comfort level for ourselves.
Sure.
I want to not like you, but I want to like you.
So that's a good segue. Let's hear from our eyes.
Oh, okay, sure. Sure, I'll just run through this real quick. Contributions, connecting with people, inspiring and optimistic, natural leaders, situational agility, creativity, adaptability. You get one. Okay, fine. Multitasking, excitable, strong in convictions, and detail-oriented. Our fears are in disappointing others, not being heard, a feeling of disconnectedness with the group, feeling of conflict, not contributing properly, and being misunderstood. How are we misunderstood, you ask? We tend to be maybe overly utopian, or perceived as being overly utopian, scatterbrained, unfocused, non-critical thinkers, not serious thinkers, and pushovers. How others can better relate to us, they can be more open-minded, and be a little bit more big picture versus sweating the small stuff in the process. We'd like you to try to be more flexible and to explore possibilities and give our ideas a chance.
Interesting. What, any ahas, any things that you were surprised at, any questions?
So, question, in your strengths, I believe you included detail-oriented, though I don't think you were so on board with that, and someone else in your group was more so.
Yeah.
And then in your how to relate, you said we need to be more big picture, so how do you reconcile those two?
So, being detail-oriented and big picture can kind of go hand in hand. I mean, yeah, you can be specific about details. It depends on the situation. So obviously, it can be very situational. But basically, looking at the bigger picture versus like the little things, meaning as a whole, like instead of just jumping ahead and trying to get everything done, we have to like kind of stop, slow down, and assess everything, make sure everybody's needs are met, make sure that things are being done. But at the same time, when you do that, you can also do that with details, if that makes sense. So it can be a combination of both.
And keep in mind that any of these styles, we're all combinations at various levels of all of the styles in some way.
He and I were talking, and I think this distinction in the detail orientation is that it's like a people-focused detail orientation. So making sure folks are happy, right? Like, and I'm making sure that the process is working, or that there is a process. And so I feel like that might be a little bit of the detail orientation.
Sure.
Can I break in? I think where the misunderstanding is that we understand the process and that our minds think fast. Not just some people go this way and we're already here. It doesn't mean that we've missed a step. And I think that's where people misunderstand. They think that I'm running ahead, but I already got that. It's coming with me. Sort of.
Anyway.
Right. I believe it is.
Any other questions, thoughts?
Yeah, well, my question is, so what type of people would you be most comfortable working with?
I'd be less comfortable with C. I think I have a little of the other two, where I'm more D, but I have like no C at all. So I enjoy hearing you guys talk, but your personality are the people I have this conflict.
We're opposites too.
Yes, you are.
You have any?
Fred, did you have a comment?
Well, I feel like the thing about we want people to be open-minded is just not so rigid. It's the rigid thought. I mean, there has to be processes, and things have to be checked out. But when that becomes a block to, and people just put blinders on because they're, in my perception, sometimes they're just afraid to look at different ways. And that's both my fear and my recommendation on how people could. It's probably pretty hard for people who really want to be in the safe zone. But
You just need them to collaborate more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's hear from our S's back here in the corner.
I have to read it. Okay, I'll read it. Okay, so our contributions are that people know that we can rely on us. We're patient, predictable. We think about a lot about advanced outcomes, so we're good at the contingency planning or seeing troubleshooting potential issues. And we have commitment and following through on something. On fears is that we don't like conflict. No, we don't like lack of thoroughness or clarity. Chaos is terrible, and the fear that going through on our contributions, we might be perceived as having wasted time or resources. We are misunderstood because we might be seen as too reflective, too slow, not fast enough, not stressed enough, or not with enough sense of urgency. And how others can relate to us is, stop and listen to us, invest in the relationship before just jumping in with the direction, give information with context, and explain and tell us how this fits into the moving parts.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, ahas, surprising things that you were, yes?
I was just going to say the conflict comment, I guess, goes back to kind of what you said, Chris. That's interesting because for me as a D, I see conflict as growth, not so much as butting heads and I hurt somebody's feelings, So the feedback and whatever, but that's interesting because that's not the intent, but that could be the impact, and so.
Or the interpretation.
Or an interpretation
right?
too, but but the conflict. So because I always say to my kids, if I'm being a little bit more direct, I'm pushing everything out into the center, so we all are looking at all the facts together. And there's, who took the cookies? So it was you, whatever the issue is. Where I'm pushing everything, whereas it might just be for one of my children, like, oh my gosh, it's too overwhelming, and I have to kind of go back and explain the value of, what the issue is, because one child might feel it as being something else, but it's not the intent, but it could be still the impact on that person, So it comes back to communication style of being a little bit more sensitive in terms of how D's might deliver that to you,
Yep.
We were saying that we all really are a mix of the four, and listening to the different groups, I'm impressed with how much I relate to each of the groups. I'm like, oh, I should have been there. Oh, I should have been there. I think in different situations, I am a different, I'm in a different quadrant. If I'm doing calculations, there is no way I want to rush a decision. I check 50 times the numbers,
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm impressed with how much I think I relate to all of the different.
I'm surprised how these groups worked together, given that we're the same types and we're not having similar attributes.
Oh, you mean within the time?
Yeah.
Who do you guys work with? Best
We have workshops.
That's my question.
Is there a compatibility matrix going along with this?
There's, what you see more is, there probably is, I don't have one with me. But if you think about these four styles, the compatibility is we tend to get along better and work better together with people of our same style. But we may know that we need those other people, as just like you said, that I'm an I and I don't have any C in me, but I got a little bit of this other stuff. So if you were working in a group in an organization and you needed some detail people, you'd want some of those guys over there.
I want to be my surgeon or my architect.
Yes. Yes.
Or my
Yes.
mechanic or.
Right. So there's different, when we think as leaders, and when we think of even in our job searches and our transition, as we think of the kinds of people that we're interviewing or being interviewed by, and you think about, you look at for some of the characteristics that we've all talked about, think about your own comfort level and how you might adapt this is that platinum rule. How can now that I know more about how I work, how can I adapt my style so that I'm more accepted, more perceived the way I want to be perceived, and not misunderstood by the people who are interviewing me, or the people who on that first week on the job, those kinds of things.
Something that just came to my mind is that there's to me, I'm realizing that there's also something about the culture in general and how it's evolved. And as an older person, having seen that change over time, and I feel like we're in a time, it just kind of came to me, that the eyes is what everybody wants now, the whole social media environment. And so much of what I'm looking at and having challenges with my search is that people are looking for eyes. They're looking for people who have this influence, who relate, and all of this. And then that's the dominance of the culture now, with a subdominant in the C, the technical and quants and all that. So I think, and maybe I'd be interested in hearing what other people think, whether there's sort of a cultural time disfavoring maybe of the D's and the S's a bit.
Who else has a
What?
Any of those?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it's, yes, I agree with you. We did this with my old organization, and people were reluctant to be identified as S's because our organization was very oriented in this like very old man leadership kind of model. And it was always about like going to war. And they're not, it wasn't a defense contractor, but they're lobbyists. But like the language is very much about like going on the hill and fighting. And so people were very reluctant when their DiSC profile came out in that SI, touchy-feely kind of zone. They didn't like it. They didn't like what that meant for them in the larger organization. And I think it's definitely an organizational culture type thing. I think it's, how it ties into how you're perceived by the leadership, because the leadership, and D is very much the one that always gets identified as leadership. And so when you're looking at like the assessment tool, it's like the way leadership is assessed is very much in this like willing to be active, willing to be communicative, and if it's not your personality, it feels very like,
One of the important parts is to be able to make sure that if you're a leader and you're not, whatever your style is, that you're surrounding yourself with people who complement your style so that you have a leadership team and culture that has all of the kinds of styles that work best for whatever your mission might be.
And I would add that it's like it's sharing that value. So like the leader has to say like, I need these buckets of people to make it.
And understanding yourself enough to recognize
that.
Because you've been trying to
I maybe wanted to get some thoughts, because what's interesting here is understanding where you are and then relating that to the position that you want, because, and which may not align, right? So you may have 4 offers here that require a D, but you're not a D. So the question I have is, how challenging is it every day to wake up and pretend to be a D in the job, which is required of you, right, when that's not your skill set? And I would think over time that can get, unless you can adapt, but if you're finding yourself adapting every day, I would assume get exhausting. And again, the perception of others of you, because I was one of, I don't know how many did this, I took the full assessment a couple weeks ago and got a huge report, and I ended up with primarily S, with it's above and below the line. So I was way above on S, above on I and C, and below the line on D. But my 30-year career has been in sales, and sales leadership, so running teams and organizations, which would, if you were to kind of look at that, that's 180 degrees from where I probably would align from a job perspective. So I'm just interested, in philosophically sort of how that plays out, because if you're trying to kind of adapt every day, it can be challenging.
Well, I think for me, what happens is that by taking the DiSC, it helps you kind of see and have that aha.
Right.
And think, what has been so challenging for me all this time? And when I took it for the first time, I was like, oh, now I get it. I've always been in roles that when I took it with a whole team, they assumed that I was a D, because I was always in a leadership position of some sort. I am way down on the bottom I want the details and I want everybody to get along. But, somebody talked about your natural style, or somebody talked about adapting. And one of the, not Wiley, but another, and I can't remember, there's an assessment, there's a couple of other DiSC companies that do DiSC. And one of them has a natural style versus an adaptive style.
Yeah.
So the natural style is, what do you, when you're stressed and things are just, like, what do you naturally, default to? What behaviors do you sort of come natural for you? Versus if I'm in a job, as you just described, that requires me to exhibit more of the kinds of characteristics of a D, I'm going to learn how to do that. Now that might get so hard for me after a time that I want to do a transition and I want to step over and do more people kinds of things over here. That's what happened for me personally. Is I used to be a big IT project manager. I managed a bunch of projects on IT, lots of detail, lots of having to be in a leadership role. Now I do more facilitation and collaboration and teaching and working with people and culture and that kind of thing. So I've sort of moved from this side of the thing to that side. I'm also an off-the-charts introvert. And so standing up here, is fine, but it takes a lot out of me when I go home this afternoon. All I'm going to want to do is like, okay,
But it is uncanny when you take the test or take the assessment, you will reflect and go, oh my gosh, whoever scored this has been sitting with me for 30 years, because it's literally uncanny how accurate it is.
It really is, and it's very insightful. And if you were, and we probably need to wrap this up. I mean, you guys can take your seats, AC, anything you like. When you do, I'm working with a group, there's a variety of different reports, and so I've had folks where two people had to work together, but they didn't get along, and there's a comparison report that you can do to where the report will show you the characteristics of the two people and what works and what doesn't, and give you some insights and some examples. And there's also a culture or a whole workplace report also. You took this with your team for a group of people. You see where all of the dots are. And then you look at your organization and you say, well, I need a bunch of detail people. But my people are way up there. Or I need people to really, we're having trouble in, customer service. I got all my people. That's more people down here and not enough people up here in the customer and over there in the customer service. It really makes you look at, how your organization's performing and where you fit and where you don't fit. From a job transition perspective, the insights that Chris was sharing are really helpful for this as well. A couple more, and then I think we need to wrap up. Yeah.
Good question. How does this compare to like the skill strength and Myers-Briggs? Are they completely different, or are they complementary?
They're complementary. She said, ask about Myers-Briggs, the strength finders. There's a whole bunch of assessments, and a lot of them, when you really look at some of the assessments, some of it's just in ease of understanding. I sort of resonate with this because I get it, and it's easy to get, it's easy to understand, as opposed to all of the 16 different parts of Myers-Briggs. Strength finders, I've taken that as well. When you look at, when you're coaching someone, you're working with a team and you have them take multiple ones, you can kind of think about what the organization's looking like if you have them take multiple assessments, because they all look at things a little bit differently. We need to...
I just have a really quick comment about a very easy test that if you are part of an organization or you're in interface relationship, whatever. The DiSC is long, but one that's super short that I took very recently, a positive psychology track thing. Anyway, was by Smaley and Trent, and it's the 5-minute personality test, and it categorizes people as L, O, G, or B. It's lion, otter, golden retriever, or beaver.
Interesting.
So yeah, but it did have a lot of similarities in it, and it's shorter, so it's kind of nice one for that. So Smaley and Trent, anyway.
How do you spell that?
SMAILEY
I'll be,
and Trent.
I'm gonna hang around here for a few more minutes, but I think we need to kind of
Yeah,
wrap this up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But we want to begin by thanking you.
Yeah.